And this country was happy to oblige by giving Rachel Zegler the largest box office bomb of her career, effectively ending her career. No one's ever going to want to see Rachel Zegler star in anything ever again. The empty theaters was a giant F you. We'll do exactly what you say.
You ever wonder what happens when you mix hot lava and chicken?
Disney didn't just lose money with their Snow White reboot, they lost something way more valuable, their reputation. After blowing nearly $250 million trying to rebrand a beloved classic, Disney didn't just get criticized, they became the punchline. Family Guy mocked them. South Park obliterated them. And now even their own creations might be turning against them. At the center of the chaos? Rachel Zegler, an actress who never saw the storm coming. But the disaster wasn't just about her. This was the moment the world realized something terrifying. Disney's magic is disappearing, and the world is laughing as it happens. And the scariest part? The next blow could be even worse. Family Guy didn't just roast Disney, they obliterated them. In a scene that hit like a wrecking ball, Peter Griffin wanders through Disneyland looking confused, lost, and frustrated.
Roller coaster dives in the background with the label Disney stock slapped on it.
Family Guy didn't just roast Disney, they obliterated them. In a scene that hit like a wrecking ball, Peter Griffin wanders through Disneyland looking confused, lost, and frustrated. If Family Guy fired shots at Disney, South Park dropped an all-out nuclear bomb, and they didn't miss. In their now infamous special, Joining the Pandaverse, South Park didn't just mock Disney's strategy, they tore it apart, piece by piece. The episode introduced a character unmistakably modeled after Kathleen Kennedy, the executive behind Disney's recent avalanche of remakes. And they gave her a new weapon, the Panderstone. Its power? To insert diverse women into every major franchise, whether it made narrative sense or not. The message wasn't even hidden. It was blasted out like a megaphone.
Oh, you said we were going to a place Walt Disney built.
No, Peter, I said supported.
Disney's formula isn't storytelling anymore. It's corporate checkbox marketing. But South Park didn't stop there. They unleashed a multiverse nightmare where every beloved classic character was replaced with a bland, hollow version that existed solely to send a message. Cartman, furious, watched his world collapse around him. A satire so brutal, it was almost painful to watch. And then came the moment that broke the internet. The South Park version of Kathleen Kennedy throws her hands in the air and screams, "Put a chick in it and make her gay!" One sentence. 5 seconds of animation. That's all it took to summarize what millions of frustrated fans had been feeling for years. It wasn't just funny. It was devastating because it rang true. The phrase went viral immediately, turning into a rallying cry across social media. Not because people hated diversity, but because audiences were sick of being force-fed, hollow, soulless versions of the stories they once loved. South Park wasn't attacking inclusion. They were exposing bad storytelling disguised as progress. And here's what made it even more devastating. South Park didn't have to exaggerate. They didn't have to twist reality. They simply held up a mirror. And Disney hated what they saw. But the damage didn't end with the cartoons. Because just when Disney needed its biggest legends to rally behind them, one of their most powerful allies turned into a surprising critic. And it came straight from the man who helped build their empire in the first place. When South Park exposed Disney's downfall, it stung. But when George Lucas, the creator of Star Wars, took a shot at Disney's leadership, it hit like a sledgehammer. In a viral clip that spread like wildfire, George Lucas is seen sitting on a panel alongside Kathleen Kennedy, the very executive driving Disney's modern strategy. The moment should have been a celebration. Instead, it turned awkward fast.
That girl's hot.
That's a guy.
That other guy's handsome.
That's a girl.
That cat is cute.
That's a dog.
What is everything?
With a casual smile that barely masked his frustration, Lucas openly criticized the direction his beloved franchise had taken. He didn't need to name names. He didn't need to scream. The room understood immediately, and the audience laughed. But it was an uncomfortable, almost guilty laugh. Because deep down, even Disney's most loyal defenders knew the truth. This wasn't the Star Wars they grew up loving. Lucas's subtle jab wasn't just about one franchise. It exposed a growing crack in Disney's entire foundation. When the man who literally built your crown jewel publicly questions the way you're running it, that's not a troll. That's not a YouTuber ranting in his bedroom. That's the architect telling you the house is crumbling. And if George Lucas was willing to say it out loud, you could bet thousands of other industry insiders were whispering the same thing behind closed doors. But even that wasn't the end of Disney's nightmare. Because while executives scrambled to put out the fires behind the scenes, Rachel Zegler, the unwitting poster child of the Snow White disaster, was about to deliver a brutal new meme without even realizing it.
Tell me exactly what it is you're afraid of.
I keep having the same dream. Everywhere I look, people are being replaced.
Okay, and who do you think is going to have you replaced?
Them. The puppet masters.
If Disney needed a symbol for how badly Snow White flopped, Rachel Zegler handed it to them on a silver platter. She posted what should have been a sweet TikTok, walking into a theater, flowers in hand, ready to celebrate her own movie. But there was just one problem. The theater was practically empty. No crowds, no excitement, just a few scattered viewers lost in a sea of empty seats. What was meant to be a heartwarming moment turned into instant internet mockery. Within hours, memes compared it to showing up at a funeral. Some even crowned it the loneliest premiere in Disney history. But it wasn't just about Rachel. It was about the total disconnect between Disney and its audience. A reminder that no amount of marketing could force people to care. And just when it seemed like the situation couldn't get any more awkward, the controversy surrounding Rachel's casting reignited. And this time, it got even uglier.
The last time I had the dream, I was walking down the school hallway. And then I see Butters, and he's like, "Hey, Eric, you want to see what my mom packed me for lunch?" And that's when I start to notice that something's wrong. Everyone I cared about has been systematically replaced.
Rachel's empty theater wasn't just a bad look. It was a warning sign. $250 million poured into Snow White, and this was the return. Awkward TikToks, brutal memes, and an audience that didn't even bother to show up. But the real humiliation hadn't even started yet. Because while Rachel was posting from empty theaters, Family Guy and South Park were gearing up for something even worse. They turned Disney's entire strategy into a national punchline. Suddenly, it wasn't just critics online or angry fans venting on Reddit. It was mainstream comedy shows, some of the most influential voices in pop culture, openly mocking the once untouchable Disney brand. Not with subtle jabs, not with polite critiques, but with savage, blistering attacks that made it clear Disney wasn't reinventing magic. They were burying it. And what made it even more brutal? Audiences weren't outraged. They were laughing. But that first wave of jokes was just the beginning.
Rachel Zegler is not having her year where her Snow White movie is going to lose $200 million for Disney, but doing so, she also screwed over Tangled in the process. When Rachel Zegler was cast as Snow White, she joined one of Disney's biggest franchises, which was Disney Princess, where they've done $45 billion in merchandise sales just in the last 25 years.
Because Family Guy was about to fire the first direct shot, and it hit way harder than anyone expected. Rachel Zegler's empty theater moment didn't just highlight Snow White's box office disaster. It ripped open old wounds the internet hadn't forgotten. From the moment her casting was announced, the backlash had been loud and brutal. Fans pointed to the original fairy tale. Snow White, with skin as white as snow, wasn't just a random detail. It was part of the story's core identity. To many, Disney's decision to change it felt less like a creative update and more like a calculated marketing move. And audiences weren't buying it. But the real damage came later, when Rachel didn't just defend her role, she attacked the source material. In interviews, she called the original Snow White weird, outdated, and even suggested the prince was problematic. It wasn't just bold, it felt like she was spitting on the story she was supposed to honor. For longtime Disney fans, it was the final straw. If you're going to reinvent a classic, at least respect what made it iconic in the first place.
With the goal of trying to keep that brand fresh, they've tried to do live-action reboots of the princess movies, and they have had success so far, with Cinderella making over $500 million on a budget of $90 million, and then Beauty and the Beast making $1.3 billion.
Rachel's words poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning, and no amount of TikToks, apologies, or PR campaigns could put it out. But things were about to get even more explosive, because this controversy wasn't staying inside Hollywood anymore. It was about to get political. And that's when the real chaos began. Just when the Snow White controversy seemed like it couldn't get any worse, real-world politics set it on fire. Rachel Zegler publicly voiced her support for Palestine during the escalating Israel-Gaza conflict, a move that instantly split audiences. Meanwhile, her co-star, Gal Gadot, was already a well-known supporter of Israel. It was a collision waiting to happen. What started as a fairy tale remake quickly turned into a full-blown international incident. Suddenly, Snow White wasn't just a movie anymore. It was a political battleground.
The last two attempts for Disney just haven't worked, where Halle Bailey's Little Mermaid lost $25 million for Disney and Rachel Zegler's Snow White is way worse and it could lose up to $200 million. Now, because of those two failures, Disney's pausing their other attempts at making live-action reboots, including the live-action Tangled movie.
The backlash came fast. Lebanon banned the film entirely, not because of Rachel, but because of Gadot's involvement. But by that point, it didn't matter who was to blame. The damage was done. Audiences who just wanted to watch a simple fantasy story found themselves caught in the middle of a global conflict. And Disney? They stood frozen, watching one of their most expensive projects collapse under the weight of controversies they couldn't control. But even then, the worst part wasn't the politics. It was how far Disney had strayed from its original promise, to offer an escape, not a lecture, not a battlefield, not a corporate agenda. And as the controversies piled up, one brutal truth became impossible to ignore. The trust that once made Disney untouchable was slipping away fast. And not even a new billion-dollar gamble could save them from what was coming next. By now, the writing was on the wall.
Tangled was actually the most expensive animated movie of all time, costing $260 million, and it only made $592 million, which actually means it lost money factoring marketing and ticket splits. Still, Disney saw potential in Tangled having more success as a live-action movie, but now due to the failure of the Rachel Zegler films, they're no longer going to be pursuing that or other projects.
Disney wasn't just facing bad press. They were losing something way worse. Audience trust. For decades, Disney stood for timeless stories, characters you could believe in, worlds you wanted to escape into. Now, they stood for lectures, reboots, and corporate checklists. And the worst part? It wasn't just conservative critics or angry YouTubers calling them out anymore. It was everybody. Left, right, old, young. Across the board, audiences were tuning out. Family Guy mocked them. South Park obliterated them. But the real storm was still gathering, because The Simpsons were circling. Yes, Disney owns The Simpsons now.
There's more. There's always more. Let's have a listen.
I mean, you know, the original cartoon came out in 1937, and very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story.
But that hasn't stopped the show from taking increasingly savage jabs at Marvel fatigue, Star Wars oversaturation, and the endless parade of remakes. They've already made it clear. Corporate loyalty isn't going to save Disney from becoming a joke. And if The Simpsons fully turn their sights on Snow White, Tangled, or the Disney brand itself, it won't just sting. It'll leave a permanent scar. Because The Simpsons still hold a kind of cultural credibility that few shows can match. When they roast you, it sticks. It lingers. It becomes history. And for Disney, already bleeding trust and goodwill, that might be the blow they never recover from. At this point, it's no longer a question of whether Disney made a few mistakes. It's whether they can survive the storm they've created. Snow White wasn't just a box office flop. It was a cultural wake-up call. Family Guy laughed. South Park dismantled. The Simpsons are sharpening their knives. And audiences, the people Disney once enchanted so effortlessly, are walking away. Not out of outrage, but out of exhaustion. Rachel Zegler became the accidental face of this collapse, but she was never the real problem. The real issue runs deeper. A studio that forgot why people loved them in the first place. Not because they checked boxes, not because they delivered lectures, but because they told stories that felt timeless, honest, and pure. Now, with $500 million on the line for a Tangled remake that's already facing backlash, Disney stands at the edge of a cliff. They can course-correct, return to storytelling that resonates, or they can double down and watch another era of magic vanish into thin air. Because if Family Guy, South Park, and The Simpsons have made anything clear, it's that once the world starts laughing at you, really laughing, it's almost impossible to win them back. And this time, Disney isn't fighting critics. They're fighting the culture they helped create. And right now, they're losing. Don't forget to like and subscribe.